Hey, Miss Amelia.
Well, hey, Miss Sydney, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Good. If y'all only knew the behind the scenes of this episode, Lord have mercy. The technical issues we found. It's just a great time to be alive.
Welcome to No More Sunday Scaries, a podcast for women navigating the chaos of life, love, and work, all while keeping Jesus at the center.
If you're in the middle and figuring out what's next, this is your safe space to laugh, learn, and lean into God's plan for your life.
I'm Emily.
And I'm Sydney. Together, we're here to unpack those difficult questions, tackle the what am I doing with my life moments, and remind you that you're never alone in this journey.
So grab your coffee and let's kick those Sunday Scaries to the curb.
Because with faith, community, and a little bit of fun, the work week doesn't have to be so scary. Let's dive in. Well, we're back at it again. We are continuing our series, Navigating Life in the Middle, Faith, Fulfillment, and Finding Your Path. We are going to be on episode 4, Balancing Relationships, Work, and Faith Without Losing Yourself. So we're going to be diving into managing time, energy, and priorities to sustain our relationship with Jesus amid all the demands of adulthood, career, and relationships. So when you think of balancing relationships, work, and faith without losing yourself, Emily, what do you think of?
I know we've spoken about relationships and friendships before, and we've spoken about boundaries. So I feel like this is kind of, okay, all together, how do we make sure that we are balanced in our life, but then too making time for the things that we need to make time for? And so I think about going back to the piece of without losing yourself. Before I think you can manage time and all of this, you've got to figure out who you are. So going through those steps of, okay, what does time management look like for me? Mm-hmm. And I say that because if you, Sydney, mention, I've got this great planner and I'm doing X, Y, Z, when I copy and paste that, if that doesn't really work for me, I don't need to get down on myself of like, what didn't work, I just can't do it. Like, you've got to do the research and figure out, okay, what works best for you. And I know some of the examples that we've mentioned before is like time blocking when it comes to managing your time. Of course, like putting appointments on your schedule, but then putting down like work times, putting down when you're going to hang out with friends, putting down different things. Because if you're a person where it's like, it's not on the schedule, it's not going to happen. So if you're not making time for it, that can easily be kind of looked over. But when I was reading the sustaining a relationship with Jesus amid all the demands, it made me think about like how people talk about like if he wanted to, he would, or like, you know, meaning if a guy like wants to talk to you, he's going to make time for you. And that's true. But then it's also like we make time for what's important. So people have so many demands, yet they're able to have these big families and all of that. But then other people who maybe have a smaller family are like, I'm just so busy, or I'm kind of rambling here. But all this to say is like you make time for what is important to you. And so even though if you've got a lot of demands, like if you make time to have your quiet time, if you make time for your devotion, then that's how you sustain that relationship. Because I know for me, I can be like, oh, I'm so busy, but yet I had an hour to scroll through TikTok. Mm-hmm. Like I had enough time to open up my Bible and read. Yeah. Or like I'm just not a morning person, which I don't say that because I am a morning person, but I'm like I just could never wake up at 5. And it's like wake up 30 minutes early and it'll be fine. Because those times when I've had to come in early for work, I've woken up at 5 and it's been just fine. Like you make time for what is important. And so just like when you build relationships of if your friends are always saying you're busy, they're busy, or if you're saying you're busy, like if it's like, think about this, like when you want to hang out with people, you make time for them. When you don't, you're busy, you got this going on. Of course, random things can pop up, but you know those people who you like don't really want to hang out with and you make excuses. I think about the same thing of like, well, one, of course, like you would make time for if they're important in your life, but then with God as well, of if you're making all of these excuses, you know, he's sitting there like, I'm here. And if you wanted to, you would. Like, if you wanted to continue to grow with me, you'd make time for that. And he is like, if you don't make time for it, I'm still going to be here. I'm ready when you are. And so it just makes me think of like your time management looks different, but you make time for what is important in your life.
Yeah.
What about you? What do you think about?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that for sure. This is a topic I feel like I struggle with quite a bit just because I'm still new into the whole professional world, also being away from home and being away from my friends in Texas, and then also being a wife and things like that. So, learning how to balance all of this and really focus on my priorities and things like that has been quite difficult for me. So, kind of going into like last what we talked about last week, how it really kind of takes almost like 2 years to really feel like you have gotten settled in somewhere or anything like that. So, like, say you're going into like a new job, or say, maybe you have started hanging out with friends and things like that and figuring out your schedule. I really feel like it just takes time. I think it takes, depending on the person, is how much time it's going to take, whether you're easily adaptable to certain situations and things like that. So I think that like it's hard to really kind of like pinpoint and almost like suggest any suggestions on this topic, just because it really depends on the purpose or the person. For me, it took me 2 years to fully feel like I have fully grasped, what my priorities are, how to make time for relationships and things along those lines. And so for me personally, I have definitely been trying to replace good time that I'm using on social media, like Emily was saying, and things like that, to maybe go for a walk. Or if I want to scroll TikTok, I'm using like my walking pad at home to like go for a walk and things like that. And that's kind of how you can almost like play the system in a way of like balancing everything and balancing your priorities. And then at that point, like you've scrolled TikTok for like maybe an hour or so, and maybe you've walked a mile or a mile and a half or something like that. And so I think that that's something that like I've really been trying to um, just do in the time, is like if I'm going to do something, like I need to do something else with it. Say I want to watch YouTube or anything like that, I'll put YouTube on like my Echo Home in my kitchen, and I'll play YouTube videos while maybe I'm cleaning the kitchen or anything like that. So that's kind of how I balance those priorities of keeping my house clean, but also maybe like having something on going on in the background as well. That helps kill that time that I feel like, you know, is almost like I don't want to do this moment, but it's like if I can play a YouTube video in the background, or maybe a podcast, or maybe listen to my favorite pastor preach a sermon or anything like that, I can get the whole house cleaned, or I can get the living room, kitchen, and dining room cleaned, things like that. So that's kind of how I feel like I try to balance that in regards to like personal situations. Relationships have definitely been obviously a challenge, just because a lot of my friends are back in Texas. And so it's been kind of hard to maintain those, just because a lot of those relationships have had to be virtual, which, I mean, we can go back to COVID times and know that the virtual side of life is fairly difficult, which is very ironic for this digital stage that we're in the world. So that's been kind of hard to maintain, just with that sense of trying to juggle and balance and still make my friends at home feel like I'm still thinking about them, and then them also feel like they're still thinking about me. And so I think that that's something that I've definitely struggled with. And sometimes it just revolves to a text saying like, hey, just thinking about you, you live in my mind rent free, and then like that's it. Or, sending a video on Instagram to each other or anything like that. That's usually what it feels like we're having to do, just to juggle those relationships. So that's kind of how I feel like I maintain those relationships. And then of course, like being married, there's just different types of of relationships. And so I think it just depends on each couple for how you maintain and balance that stress, and just working through trying to figure out like everyone's schedule and routine, and when someone wants their quiet time, or when someone is a little overstimulated, or when someone is ready to have conversation and things like that. So just like learning how to manage all of that. But I feel like Dakota and I have been trying to really work on like our open communication and making sure that we are communicating to each other when we're trying to maybe focus on a task, or he's of course in medical school going through his residency applications right now and interviews. So when he's ready to get ready for those, I let him be. I don't really try to disturb him or anything like that. And then when we're doing our cleaning and things like that, he'll clean his bathroom, anything like that, the kitchen, living room, things like that. But while we're doing that, we're usually like doing our own thing, just to kind of balance that relationship. But then at the end of the day, like we do come together and just make sure that we're checking in on each other and making sure that if they need anything, from each other, like we're able to fulfill that. I feel like we've had a lot of conversations lately just talking about, how do we express what the other one needs from someone, from the other person. And so we've had a lot of those conversations to kind of balance our relationship and make it healthy, and make sure we're setting up the foundations on, or setting our relationship on a good foundation, and not a rocky one for sure. And then just trying to like balance uh quiet time with Jesus. That I feel like that just for some reason like it's just like a task that just gets pushed to the side, which is wild, because the Lord doesn't push us aside, but we somehow always end up sometimes feeling like we're pushing him aside. And so for me, I've really just been trying to, like I said earlier, like if I'm cleaning or anything like that, I'm listening to a pastor I love. I love listening to Megan Fate Marshman. She's a really good pastor if you haven't listened to her. But I love listening to her preach, and things like that. So if I'm cleaning, I have on a podcast. Our church just recently started a podcast, so I've been listening to that one as well. And so just something that kind of, if you're going to be doing something, and you want to balance your quiet time, try to figure out if there's like a way that you can almost join the two together. And then it's kind of like you're not knocking two birds with one stone, but you are being able to be intentional. But maybe it's like if you need to focus on what the pastors are saying and like actually be present and fully in the moment, maybe you don't clean. Maybe you are walking while you're doing that, because walking obviously takes some focusing to make sure that you're not going to fall or anything like that if you're on a treadmill, or maybe you go outside to the park or anything like that and you're listening to worship music or anything like that. So that's kind of how I feel like I balance those things. Is I really try to like, it's almost like I play the system and try to like join things together, but also try to make sure that I'm being fully present in the moment if I am joining those situations together. So I feel like when I'm, working in all of that and just trying to maintain, a stress free lifestyle or anything like that, it usually in just focuses just on like how I can almost do two things at once if I feel like I need to do something. But then majority of the times, like two, if it's quiet time or anything like that, or reading the word, it's making sure that I'm being fully present in what God is trying to tell me in that moment.
Yeah, I kind of like the idea, which I'm sure we all do to an extent, but being intentional about it, of like, I don't know a good word, but double dipping, of like, hey, I'm listening to this sermon. Like if someone sends me a sermon, which you did, you sent me the sermon, which I think we maybe talked about on TikTok, but you sent me a sermon and I listen to it like while I was getting ready and then while I was driving to work. And so it wasn't something, because then I'm a visual learner. And so sometimes I have to like go back because I won't be paying attention. I'll be like, boop, and then I'll get to do stuff and I'll be thinking about something else. And I'm like, let me rewind because I wasn't listening. And so I know I'm pretty bad about that. But yeah, like whenever I'm cleaning or driving or things that are like mindless tasks, I can couple it with that, or playing music or something. I like that idea. But then there are times when I'm like, no, I actually need to like listen and take notes. And so then I have to like pause everything, put my phone away, and like, no, I need to focus on that because I'm not a good multitasker. But areas that you can, like a podcast or music or sermons or something like that, if you kind of maximizing your time. And as we were talking about the things that we just talked about, if you are someone who's like, yeah, this is great, but like, how do I know what's important? Meaning, like we're saying, like, prioritize your relationships, prioritize this. And you're like, but I don't know what that looks like for me. Or if you're someone who is thinking that they are prioritizing their task, but you still feel drained, or you feel like you've like copied and pasted from someone else, meaning like, Sydney has this great time management and she says like, I make time for friends and then my husband and then my dog and family and so on and so forth. And you gather that from her or your friend and you do it and you feel like you're just kind of like going through the motions or playing someone else's life, I guess. Then I encourage you to do like a values activity. That could be, I'm a person where I'm like, I like a sheet, I like a website that tells me how to do it. But all you do is just figure out, 3 to 5 of your core values. And so in the show notes, I can share a model of like a link to how to do this. But pretty much you just could Google like what are 150 or what are 100 values. And you just look at that list and kind of pick 3 to 5. And you may be like, well, that's going to be hard. Well, you could do it where you pick 20 and then you narrow it down to 10 and then so on and so forth. But you really start to bargain with yourself because some of the things out there, it'll be like honesty, trustworthiness, truth. You're like, you start to bargain of like, okay, what's the best word? Like they all kind of mean the same, but what's the word? I say that because those were kind of in my top 10 and I decided on honesty. But all that to say, like some of my values when I boil down to it are like honesty, personal responsibility, family, and I think I picked love or something. I don't know why I picked love when I did it the first time, but maybe kindness or something. But I say that because like if it's going to be between choosing time between my family and my friends, like I'm going to pick my family. And like I'm always going to make time for my family within reason, of course. And so, but if you're someone who, relationships are important to you, then you're going to be the one who's going to want to go hang out with friends. You're going to be the one who's like texting people that's like, hey, how are you doing? But then if you've got a friend that like that, and you're not like that and you copy paste, it could feel draining. Like I think we've talked about before, like relationships are important to me, but I'm not like, oh my gosh, how are you doing, girl? Like all the time. Randomly, I'll do that. But if I copied and pasted from someone else and did it, I would feel kind of drained. And I would be like, well, I feel like I can't really do anything at home because I'm always like checking on other people. And so where sometimes that fills people's cup where it can be draining. And I think about not necessarily because I'm an introvert, but it's like because I'm an introvert and because I have all the other indications of like personal responsibility and liking to do things on my own, it drains me of like following up with people constantly. And so kind of to a detriment of like, I don't follow up when I should. And so I just say that of like, figure out what your values are. And that can be 3 words. And when you're, managing your time and you're like, is this a priority or not? See if it hits on one of your values. Now I understand one of your values may not be work. But sometimes you got to make time for work, or your value may not be, having to go to the doctor, but, health is important, or just things like that. There are going to be things that we have to do in life that maybe don't hit on our values. But if you're spending so much time on something that is not in a value of yours, it's going to feel draining. It's going to feel like you hate it here and you're not really living the life you want to live. And so that can really recenter you of just writing down what is a priority. And that doesn't mean if family is a priority that you alienate all your friends. Just maybe you dial down how much you're hanging out with them, and then you're amping up your with your family, especially if family is important to you and you live far away from them. Of okay, I feel drained because what fills my cup is being with my family, and I only get to see them once a year. Then do some Zoom calls, do some FaceTime, talk on the phone, something like that. And I'm sure my mother's listening to this and she's like, LOL, you said family. You never call me.
Dang.
And I'm like, well, yeah, that's right. I'm really bad about doing my own thing and I hate talking on the phone. But so, we've got challenges from there, but it's just a figure out what your values are. And two, in your career as well. If you're like, I hate my job, well, if you're never doing anything that's in your values and maybe you're doing things against your values, it's probably that. It's not because you have to, go to work. It's because you're doing everything against your values. Like if a value is, love, creativity, and I don't know, kindness, and like you're having to fire people all day, then it may feel really draining. Hopefully you're not having to fire people all day, but it's just an example of like, hey, if you're good at something but it doesn't fill your cup, is it the best thing for you? Yeah. And so that just made me think of, okay, what does prioritization look like for me? Figure out your values, and then if you're not able to do it, find opportunities to that. So, like for instance, if health is a value, go on the walking pad, like Sydney mentioned. And I just recently started doing this. I had a walking pad in another room. And so I would go in there and walk, and I'd be like, this is really boring. Yeah. So then I moved it into my living room. And while I was finishing up, Gilmore Girls, I was walking, and then the show would go by and I'd walked for 45 minutes and I'm like, oh wait, this is way more entertaining. Yeah. And so to kind of double dip in there made it go by a lot faster. But I'm like, if I can sit on the couch for 45 minutes and watch this episode, I sure as heck can like walk on a stationary pad and do that. So I like the idea of double dipping, as you said. I think it's efficient.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely helped me. And Dakota, my husband, will do the same thing. He'll watch while football's on or anything, which I know we're getting towards the end of football. But when he's watching something on TV or anything like that, he'll walk on the walking pad, and then we just kind of like go from there. But yeah, I definitely think that there's ways that you can prioritize almost two things at once. But I think it's also important too to make sure that you're not overwhelming yourself. If you do that, if it's feeling more so like a daunting task to you, then like don't do it. If you feel like you know, you need to get into the word, but you're like, man, I really have to like go get my Bible and things like that. If it's like that, like don't do it. The Lord would rather you come to him in an open and accepting way than making you feel like this is another chore. So don't look at it like that. Just look at your task as, this is something that I get to do. It's an opportunity for me to grow and things like that. It's going to be great at the end of the day, because it's kind of like when you go into maybe a workout class, or you go to that, maybe you're trying to maintain your relationships and you go to that small group and things like that. Leading up to it, you're like, oh, I don't really want to go. Like, this is not, I have other things that I can be doing. I could, be doing this instead of going and wasting time at the small group or anything like that. But then it's like you go, and after you leave, you feel fed. Like you feel like what Emily was saying, your cup is full. And so I think, just thinking it as that, like after I read this word, like I'm going to feel fed. My cup's going to be full. After I do the dishes, my kitchen is going to feel clean. I'm going to feel good, feel like things are in order. So it's like that after feeling to look forward to, rather than the stress that starting the task can bring. So it's important to make sure that, you're looking at the future and not just looking at like what's ahead, like right then and there, just to make sure that things don't get stressful and you feel like your priorities and things like that are now becoming chores. I think that that's something to really think about. So, but I really liked your idea on, or, listing out your values, your priorities, and then understanding like what is important to you. Because I feel like I struggle with that on pinpointing like what is really important to me. And I think sometimes too, like we go through different seasons. So it's almost like important to like kind of reassess and reevaluate because like
Mm-hmm.
yeah, your number one might always be family, but like what's your two, three, four, or things like that might change differently, right? It might be family first, and then it might be health second, but then maybe you're just like, I don't want to do health anymore, or maybe health is falling down the line or anything like that. So I think it's also important to kind of like check in with yourself and just see like, okay, I'm starting to feel like maybe my relationships aren't really fulfilling me anymore. Well, maybe it's because like you're not reading the word because it's been priority 4 instead of number 3 or 2 or 1, and so you're not focusing on how to build those healthy relationships because the Bible tells us how to build those, where to find those good people and things like that. And so it's kind of like reassessing, I think, here and there to kind of manage your priorities and kind of keep things fresh and focused. Because I think sometimes you do things maybe for too long, it kind of just falls off or doesn't work out or anything like that. So, but yeah.
Well, with prioritization, how are you fighting the Sunday scaries now?
Oh, Queen. So for me, I think I said this last episode, but I think it was like me just really trying to like focus on adulting tasks. So, like groceries, making sure the house is clean, all of the things I've really been focusing on. So, there's a book called Make Your Bed, and it's kind of like a self development help book that's really good if you have not read it. But it's around this idea that if you make your bed, it's the first task that you do. If you make your bed, your day becomes more productive because you feel like you've already checked something off of the list and you already feel accomplished. And so for me, I have been starting to make sure that when I leave the house in the morning, usually my husband isn't up by the time I'm leaving just because his rotation schedule just it varies. And currently right now he's not too deep into a rotation to where it's like he has to get up so early. So currently, right now, I can't really make the bed. But with that, I focus on like the living room, Copper's toys, my dog, because his toys are literally everywhere. There's fluff everywhere from toys, things like that. So I like to straighten up the couch. I like to put his toys in his toy basket. We have him in a little toy basket where he goes and he knows his toys go in there and they come out of there. And so we have him a little toy basket. So I'll pick up his toys, I'll straighten up Copper's bed because he has a living room bed and a crate bed. And so his living room bed is a nice bed because, of course, we have an aesthetic to maintain. So picking up the living room, making sure that that's straightened, the pillows are straight, and everything like that. And then making sure that the sink is empty of all the dishes and things like that. So I'll try to do that in the morning. I usually try to wake up around like 5:30. My first alarm goes off at 5 a.m. And then I just kind of like lay in bed. I have a hatch, so it goes off like every 8 minutes when I snooze. And so yeah, I try to do that to kind of battle those Sunday scaries and kind of get you ready for the weekend, because then it's like you don't have as much to do because you've already done the dishes, you've tidied the living room, things like that on Friday morning. So now you cheers to the weekend. So that is how I'm battling my Sunday scaries. Miss Amelia, how are you battling your Sunday scaries?
Well, I in the past I've done like meal prep, but the since this year has started, I've transitioned to where I prep my meals on Sunday for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And in the past, I hadn't done dinner. I've just been like, I know what I'm going to eat, but I won't cook it until I get home. Well, for many moons, I will get home and I'll be like, I ain't cooking anything. I don't want to do this. And then I would eat something random that wasn't a part of the schedule. So I found this girl on TikTok who does a lot of like healthier recipes, but she lays it out. I follow instructions. I'm not a good cook, but I can follow directions.
Amen.
And so she will like lay out exactly what you need to do. So I copy exactly what she does. And so I'll just she'll make like a breakfast and lunch each week, and then I'll like make something else for dinner. And so the past couple weeks I've done that. And so when I get home, I just kind of heat up my dinner. It is so great because then I'm not like, well, what am I going to eat? Or like, I've got to heat it up. And two, I understand that as a privilege that I only have to worry about myself right now because I keep thinking, if someone else was added to this equation, I don't know how great this would be because like they may want some variety where I love a sure thing. And so I just like, I heat it up and like by 6, I have eaten, I have cooked, and it's really made a difference. But Sunday, I feel like I take 2 hours and I do every single meal. So then I just kind of pull it out of the fridge and I'm ready to go. And it's nice because it takes the decision making out of my week. And it also helps me to stay on plan because I've tried to stay a little bit more on plan with eating. And it's been great. I'm like hoping to continue with it because one, it's for healthy reasons, but two, it's just so much more efficient. Like I like have breakfast every morning, lunch every morning, and really dinner every night. Not morning, but every night. And so that's been something that I want to continue, and then just try new recipes, which is exciting. And I'm thankful that TikTok has come back to us because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like saving all these recipes, and I'm like, I can go back in, I can see it, and then now I'm seeing other options, and it's just nice to see people like make different modifications, healthier modifications. And I'm like, okay, because I don't know how to do that. So I feel like that's been like, I have been set for the week and I felt much better during the work week and I can actually enjoy what's going on and not like, I got to get home and then I can't eat until 7 because I'm cooking and all this stuff. So, yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, that was our episode of balancing life and navigating work faith without losing ourselves. Hopefully, we were able to help at least one person out there. But we will be back with more episodes in this series, so stay tuned for those. And we'll see you next Sunday.
See ya.
I do not like. Hold on. Is this one controlled by a button?
Yeah, why can't you have like both down at the same time? Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh.
Stop. I'm so confused. These buttons don't make sense. It looks fine.
Yeah, that's probably better. I felt like we're like high school newsroom. So for on the lunch menu today, ravioli.
High School Musical says we have to let it go. It's the best part we've ever known. Step into the future and hold on to High School Music. Okay. Okay, are you ready?